Welcome to Angie E-lums aka Eurokra's Space. Have you ever wondered about the power of prayer and its importance in your life? Picture this. You're caught in a storm, rain pelting down, thunder booming, and lightning cracking the sky. But in your heart there's calm, a serene sanctuary, your very own shelter. That's the power of prayer. It's a conversation, a connection, an intimate dialogue between you and the divine. It's a beacon of hope when you're lost in the wilderness of life, a guiding light that illuminates your path when you're stumbling in the dark. It's a comforting whisper in the ear, a gentle nudge that says, you're not alone, you're seen, you're heard. It's a lifeline when you're drowning, a hand reaching out to pull you back to the surface. Today, we dive into the profound wisdom of Psalm 91, verse by verse, to understand its relevance in our daily lives. Psalm 91 starts with, "Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty." Now, isn't that a beautiful image to kick off our conversation? Let's unpack this. When we think of dwelling in a shelter, our minds might conjure up images of a cozy house, a safe haven from the outside world, a place where we can just be ourselves without fear. This is the kind of security and comfort the psalmist is referring to. But here, the shelter isn't a physical one, it's spiritual. And the provider of this shelter is none other than the Most High, our Almighty God. This is more than just a comforting idea, it's a powerful statement of faith. To dwell in God's shelter means to live in close communion with Him, to rely on His protection, to trust in His providence. It's about letting go of our own attempts to control and protect ourselves, and instead, leaning into God's loving care. Let's imagine for a moment you're out in the wild, and there's a storm brewing. The winds are howling, the rain is pouring, and you're utterly exposed. Now imagine there's a large, sturdy tree nearby. You seek shelter under its broad branches, and suddenly you're shielded from the storm. You're still aware of it, of course. You can hear the wind, see the rain, but you're not directly affected by it. That's what it's like to rest in the shadow of the Almighty. As we dwell in God's shelter, we can rest in His shadow, safe from the storms of life. The tempests may rage around us, but in His shadow we can find peace, comfort, and protection. And here's the real kicker. The psalmist doesn't just say this is a nice idea. No, he's making a personal declaration. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in whom I trust. There's no hesitation, no wavering, just a firm and steadfast faith in God as the ultimate protector. But we'll dive deeper into that in our next segment. These verses tell us about the protection that comes from trusting in God. Now I want you to imagine you're walking in a dense forest, alone, in the dead of night. The silence is deafening and the darkness blinding. Suddenly, you hear a rustle in the bushes. A chill runs down your spine. You freeze. Your heart pounds so loud you're certain it's a drumline for a marching band. But then you remember Psalm 91, and you remember God's promise to protect you. You see, in the 3rd and 4th verses, the psalmist speaks about God's protection as a bird protecting its young. Just as a mother bird shields her little ones under her wings, God's faithfulness is a shield and a buckler, a protective barrier against all harm. Now let's move on to the 5th and 6th verses. These verses talk about the fear of the unknown, the terror of the night, and the arrow that flies by day. These are metaphors for the fears and uncertainties we face in life. Perhaps it's the fear of losing a job, or the anxiety of a medical diagnosis, or maybe it's the uncertainty of the future. Let me tell you a little story about a man named John. John was a brave man, but he was terrified of heights. He couldn't even climb a ladder without feeling dizzy. One day his little daughter's kite got stuck in a tree. She looked at him with those big puppy dog eyes, pleading for him to retrieve it. John was scared, but he remembered Psalm 91, and he knew that God would protect him. So he climbed up the tree, rescued the kite, and became his daughter's hero for the day. This is the power of Psalm 91. It's not just about physical protection, but also about emotional and spiritual protection. It's about finding courage in the face of fear and strength in the face of uncertainty. No matter what you face, remember, with God on your side, you are safe. These verses reassure us of God's protection amidst turmoil. Now let's dive into the verses 7 to 10 of Psalm 91. Picture this. You're in the middle of a bustling city, honking horns, people hustling about, a cacophony of chaos. Yet within you there's a tranquility, a calm that seems to contradict the world outside. You see, the verses here tell us that even though we might be surrounded by chaos, We are shielded from it by our faith in God. Imagine you're a ship navigating through a tumultuous sea. The waves crash, the wind howls, but you, the ship, remains steadfast. Why? Because you have an expert captain, God. The verses 7 to 10 are like the lighthouse guiding us through the storm, reminding us that though 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, it will not come near you. Think about it. It's like being in a perfect bubble of calm in the middle of a raging storm. Just because we see the storm doesn't mean we have to be a part of it. We can witness the chaos, the turmoil, the struggles of life, but they do not have to touch us. They do not have to shake our faith or disturb our peace. In our everyday life, this could mean facing challenges at work, dealing with family issues, or navigating through personal struggles. These verses reassure us that we're not alone in those moments. We have God's protection, His divine shield that keeps us safe amidst the chaos. Just as a mother hen gathers her chicks under her wings for protection, so does God protect us. He is our refuge, our fortress, our safe haven. He is the unshakable rock we can lean on when everything else seems to be falling apart. So take heart, dear friends. When the world seems too chaotic, remember these verses. Remember that God is with you, guiding you, protecting you. As said in the verse, no harm will overtake you, no disaster will come near your tent. Here we learn about God's promise of divine protection. In this part of Psalm 91 verses 11 to 13, we're given a comforting image of God's promise to command His angels to guard us. Now let's get this straight. We're not talking about the cherubic little angels on greeting cards. No, these are mighty divine beings, celestial bodyguards if you will, assigned by the Almighty Himself to watch over us. Quite a comforting thought, isn't it? Imagine you're walking down a dark alley late at night. Suddenly you hear a rustling behind you. Your heart starts to race, your palms get sweaty. But then you remember the promise in these verses. You're not alone. You have a divine escort, an angelic entourage if you like. You can practically hear the rustle of their wings, and just like that, the fear dissipates. This is a metaphorical example, of course, but it's a powerful illustration of how these verses can be interpreted as God's protective care in our lives. It's not necessarily about physical protection, although that's part of it. It's more about spiritual and emotional protection, about feeling secure and safe in the knowledge that God is looking out for us. Now let's take it a step further. The psalm doesn't just promise protection, it promises power. It says, "You will tread upon the lion and the cobra. You will trample the great lion and the serpent." This is poetic language, of course. Unless you're a zookeeper or a snake charmer, you're unlikely to come across these creatures in your daily life. But think of the lion and the serpent as symbols. They represent all the challenges, all the problems, all the fears that we face. And what the psalm is saying is that with God's protection, we can overcome these challenges. We can face our fears. We can conquer our problems. With God's protection, you can tread upon the lion and the cobra. You can trample the great lion and the serpent. In these final verses, God promises salvation and honor to those who love Him. Isn't that a wonderful promise? It's like receiving a heartfelt letter from a dear friend, assuring us that no matter the storm, they will be there, holding an umbrella over our heads. But this isn't just any friend. This is God, the creator of the universe, making this promise. Imagine you're in the middle of a bustling city, surrounded by towering skyscrapers, honking cars, and a sea of people. Suddenly you find yourself lost, unsure of which way to go. But then you remember you have a phone, and thanks to modern technology, you can call someone who can guide you home. God's promise in these verses is similar. He assures us that when we are in trouble, we can call on Him, and He will answer us. He's like our personal GPS, always ready to show us the way. Consider the word deliver. It's such a powerful word, isn't it? When we think of delivery, we often think of packages arriving at our doorstep. But here, God promises to deliver us from trouble. It's like He's saying, "Don't worry, I've got this. Your trouble, consider it handled." And then we come to the promise of a satisfying long life. Now, isn't that a delightful thought? It's like being promised an endless supply of your favorite dessert. But instead of cake or ice cream, it's days filled with joy, peace, and the presence of God. It's a promise that our lives will not just be long, but satisfyingly full. These promises are not just lofty ideas. They are tangible realities that we can experience daily. They are like the sun that shines after a storm, the hug of a loved one after a long day, or the warmth of a hot cup of tea on a cold day. These verses end with long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. So let's embrace these promises, hold them close, and let them guide us through life's journey, like a compass leading us home. Now that we've walked through Psalm 91, let's reflect on its profound wisdom. This psalm, rich in its imagery and message, reminds us of the vital importance of putting our trust in God. In the shadow of the Almighty, we find a sanctuary, a place of rest and safety. Our faith in Him is not just a belief but a refuge, a fortress that shields us from the perils of life. We've explored the promise of God's protection, as encompassing as the feathers of a bird, shielding us from the snares that life sets in our path. Whether it's the terror of the night, the arrows that fly by day, the pestilence that stalks in the darkness, or the plague that destroys at midday, we are reminded that with God at our side, these threats lose their power. We've delved into the assurance of God's salvation, a promise that resonates in the echoes of the words, 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. This is not a promise of a life free of trouble, but a guarantee of God's unwavering presence and protection in the midst of it all. We've also reflected on the power of calling upon Him and the beautiful promise that comes with it. He will call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. A testament to the power of prayer, as personal as it is profound. Lastly, we've reveled in God's promise of long life and salvation. A promise that is not just about length of days, but about a life filled with His presence, His protection, and His salvation. Remember, no matter the challenges you face, you are never alone. God is always with you, offering His divine protection. So keep praying, keep trusting, and keep believing.